Welcome to Last Call. I'm Kelly Stewart. It is a beautiful Saturday morning, and we only have 3 more weeks until college football. So we are counting down the days here at Wager Talk. We got a lot to talk about today. We've got Steve Merril, Bryan Leonard, and unfortunately Adam Trigger. We're going to keep him on a clock. I asked the producers to put it on since we already are starting a little bit late. Gotta love those technical difficulties, but we're going to talk some baseball, some college football win totals. So let's get into it with our first guest, Mr. Steve Merril, filling on Wager Talk today. Good morning, Steve. How's your Saturday thus far?
It's been eventful, delightful. Good to see you, Kelly.
We always have lots of laughs off screen, and Joe Ranieri's favorite quote to me is hot mic, as we're going live.
Mics are hot.
All
Mics are
jokes
hot.
aside, we're having a great time off camera while we're waiting for some technical difficulties. But you guys have one job today, and that is to jump in the comment section, ask us some questions. Again, Steve Merril, Bryan Leonard, and Adam Trigger on the docket today. Steve Merril, let's talk some MLB, Mets at Orioles.
Yeah, I've been joking about the Mets all week. In fact, I was on the baseball show here on Wager Talk TV on both Thursday and Friday, and I used the Royals, the god-awful Kansas City Royals, who are now the hottest team in baseball, by the way, against the Mets on Thursday. And I told Dan, your Phillies get the Royals next, but maybe don't worry because it's just because the Royals swept the Mets. Maybe it's the Mets are that awful. And then yesterday I come back on the baseball show on Friday, and I used the Baltimore Orioles, the red-hot Baltimore Orioles, against the Mets again. And I know it seems too obvious, and it seemed too obvious yesterday, but the Orioles go out and they win 10-3. And I just don't see any reason how we can possibly play the New York Mets right now. And the reason I mentioned yesterday, I'll mention again for the new viewers, is that, look, most teams in professional sports don't quit. And Kelly, every year they talk about NFL teams quitting, and you and I both know that very few NFL teams toss the towel. Maybe one team a year really gives up. And that's the same in baseball and basketball as well. But the teams that do give up are teams that come in usually as preseason championship hopefuls. And that's exactly what the Mets were. They had the biggest payroll in baseball coming into this season. They picked up Verlander and Scherzer in the offseason, 37, 40-year-old aging veterans. They've now been the epitome of a seller at the trade deadline, getting rid of both of those guys within half a season. And you don't just flip a switch and also have motivation to come out and play a daily sport like baseball. Now, there will be a time when the Mets win some games here over the next couple of weeks probably, but they're in a slide right now. And there's no question they're a pure fade. And then on the other side of the coin, we got the Orioles, who have been the best moneymaker in all of sports, let alone baseball, on the money line the last 2 seasons. And I joke, it's my former Baltimore Orioles as a kid in the Northern Virginia area. It's my Baltimore Orioles again because the Nationals are so bad. But this team is for real. I mean, they had 2 relievers in the All-Star game. They got some great starters as well. This team is not a fluke. So we get the best moneymaker in baseball against the biggest fade in baseball right now. And the great thing about baseball is that we don't have to worry about the point spreads. We don't have to worry about covering 3.5 or 7.5 like we do in basketball or football. We just got to win the game. And you look at this points, the money line here, it's a little higher than yesterday. Yesterday was on a minus $1.55. This one's about $1.80, but it's still not high enough. And if you want to get that juice down, just like yesterday, you could have gotten the Orioles minus 1.5 plus money on the run line. And today they're plus 105. You're still getting them at plus money. And as I mentioned yesterday on the baseball show, you can always play a half a unit money line, half a unit run line, and that creates a -1 run line. A lot of sports books offer that. But if you can't get that, you're getting that around minus 135 or so. So a lot of ways to play the Orioles. But if you play this game this evening at 7 Eastern, the Orioles are the only way to play it.
All right, Steve, selling the Mets, buying the Orioles. Real quick, before we pivot to an NFL season win total we do have a question from the chat box. Let's get that one up on the screen, and we're going to talk some Astros. Bigfoot, 136. Just went away. Wrong question. Let's see if I can pull it up on my end. Will you be on the Astros with Verlander back?
Good question. I did see a little sneak peek about the Michaels. Ralph and Jeff and I did that video last week on Baseball Boy. It's still on my homepage, by the way, at wagertalk.com, Steve Merril. And we do a lot of charts and angles, such as extended road trips, home trips, losing as a favorite. So that video does have a lot of life still, and they will be updating those charts throughout the season. But I bring that up because Jeff, when I was on the baseball show with him Thursday morning, mentioned a very interesting angle, and he liked the Phillies on Thursday afternoon. A starting pitcher making his first start with a new team, if it's $1.30 or more favorite, it's 12-2, and I now believe it's 13-2. And we look at Verlander. Now, it's a little bit of a strange situation, right? Because he was on the Astros recently, but it is his first start technically with them this year. I've currently seen him at minus $1.40. So if history is any indicator, Verlander should pitch extremely well. And I think it makes a lot of sense. With all these trends and angles, I always say you want it to make sense. You want to be able to explain why it works. And I definitely see, I mean, he's on a losing team. He'd even said when they got rid of Scherzer, he was very disappointed. He thought they were there to win a championship. He got offloaded to a contender. I think he has to be extremely excited, and he's back in Houston. So I would look for not looking to fade this future Hall of Famer in a focus spot today.
Not looking to fade. I like that. Verlander, if it is ever raining or if their plane's ever delayed, anything that throws him off his rhythm, if you guys remember, circa about 2014, I started that hashtag, Fade Verlander, but not today, says Steve Merril. If you guys do have a question for Steve, drop it in the comment section and I will try to get to it. But in the meantime, Steve, talk to me about Johnny Detroit's Lions over 9.5 season wins.
Yeah, I joke. Yesterday on the baseball show, I used my free play of the Tampa Bay Rays, fading Johnny Detroit's Tigers, and they lost 8-0. But we are not going to be fading Johnny Detroit's Lions this year. And, Bryan Leonard's on later, and Bryan Leonard will tell you about his Cleveland Browns and how teams just find a way not to win. And I know the Lions are the hot pick, but I still think they're for real. And I also think Minnesota, if you want to look at a play against team in this division, the Vikings were the phoniest, as you know, Kelly. They were the phoniest 13-4 team in the history of the NFL last year. They actually had a negative point differential. They should have been 8-9 based on that. The Lions, meanwhile, probably should have been better than what were they, 9-8. Because keep in mind, this is a team that won only like 3 or 4 games, 3 games the season before. They only won 1 or 2 at the start. And then they were probably the best team in the NFL over the second half of the season. So I do think there's some upside. I think the sharp bettors realize this, and I know in Vegas this is a very popular play with a lot of the sharps, but I don't mind that because, as you know, I like to fade the public. And I don't think the public is necessarily on board with the Lions for the exact reasons I mentioned, that they've been so bad for so long, and they were really bad the first season and a half into the last half of last year. I think there's still some value with them. And all we're asking is for them to get to 10-7. This is not like they have to go 12 or 13 wins. They just have to get to 10-7. They are the favorite to win the division. They're about plus 135 to win this division. And most likely a division winner is going to have 10-7 or better record. So I think the Lions over 9.5. It seems obvious to me. It seems obvious to a lot of the sharps I've talked to. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's not value still. And this team is loaded. I mean, we talk about Verlander getting a new life in Houston with the Astros. Jared Goff, he got a new life. Number 1 overall pick, made a Super Bowl with the Rams, underperformed. And now he has a new life in Detroit, and he was really good last year. And this offense is loaded. And I also think they made probably the best offseason acquisitions between the draft and free agency of any team in the NFL. So this is a team that had 9 wins last year, was much better second half of the season, would have been a double-digit win team the way they were playing, and they look better this year. I like the Detroit Lions over 9.5 wins.
Yeah, it breaks my heart, but the Vikings were 11-0 in one-score games last year, including coming back from the potential worst, the Colts were the worst loss in NFL history. That being said, we have one more question from the chat. Great show. Guardians won yesterday. Are they the team to take again today versus the Chicago? I'm guessing they're playing the White Sox. That shows you how much I follow baseball. Questions coming from Kenneth.
Well, no, Kenneth, it's an interesting question because it tails to what I was doing with the Mets. And the White Sox are another one of those teams you have to be very careful with. Last season, midway through, Teddy Covers and I were doing Wager Talk today, and we were talking about play-on teams for the second half. And I remember Teddy, and I didn't disagree. Teddy said the White Sox had a lot of upside, and he wasn't the only one that felt that way. And they went out and they stunk in the second half. They stunk in the first half this year. So you're talking about 3 straight halves of baseball in which they've underperformed. Hard to see them getting up, kind of like the Mets right here in the near future. Whereas the Guardians are fighting the Twins for that playoff berth for the AL Central title. Once again, 2 teams heading in an opposite direction. So it reminds me a lot of that Orioles-Mets game today.
All right. Thank you to Steve Merril at Steve Merril on Twitter. Make sure you guys head over to wagertalk.com. Steve, as he mentioned, has lots of stuff up on his page, either for sale or for free. Thank you, Steve. Time to bring in my little brother that I never wanted, Adam Trigger. We fight like, little brother, big sister. That being said, welcome in Adam Trigger at Top Flight SI. And I'm so excited that you did not pick any KBO or any baseball because college football is so close. I can smell it. Adam, you have a regular season win total for us. And by I didn't expect this one. This is not a team that is on my radar whatsoever because I haven't even started my ACC prep yet. I was too busy with the Big 12, Big 10, and SEC. I'll get to the ACC later this week, but unfortunately, they fall into fourth place, and only by default because I probably would have started the Pac-12 before them had the world not started to fall apart yesterday.
Yeah, no, I mean, so first of all, Kelly, I knew I was doing the show with you, so I said, all right, I've got to come talk college football, and that's. So are we talking BC right now? That's what we're talking, right?
That's what I got sent. I said that Adam Trigger likes the BC Golden Eagles regular season win total over.
Listen,
and I'm like,
no,
where did this come from?
I had to make sure because I've done actually quite a bit of college football and Wager Talk programming this week. And so I keep trying to make sure I'm hitting the different ones I've played on different shows. So I've kind of cycled through, but I also don't want to come and talk about something I haven't bet. So this is something I did bet. I did play Boston College over 5.5 wins. And now we're going to convince Kelly in Vegas why she should play it as well. So first of all, Jeff Halfley, he's my guy. Siena College grad. You won't find any of those in college football. He's actually probably the only one because Siena canceled their football program back in 2013. But it is his fourth season as head coach of Boston College, and it is a huge year for him and his staff, in my opinion. I think he kind of has to get to a bowl game this year. It might be his last year as the coach of Boston College. 2020 was a decent season for them. They kind of overachieved. The last 2 years, they vastly disappointed. But Kelly, I don't think it's all his fault. They have had some of the worst injury luck of any team in the country. Last year at one point, I think they played a game last year where they did not have a single starting offensive lineman. They were that decimated by injury. Phil Jerkovic, who has moved on to Pitt, he never was really fully healthy during his tenure at BC, so they always kind of had to deal with him playing through injury. And I really think that hurt BC, and it kind of came to a head big time last season where they were just a disaster. And they were a disaster against the number too, 4-8 against the spread. So just based off that, like they're probably going to be undervalued against the number. But for argument's sake here, we're trying to figure out if this team can get to 6 wins because that's where the win total is at 5.5. So part of the reason I think they're going to be improved is what I just talked about. The offense, healthy offensive line should be much better. Pat Garwo the third, who was really good 2 years ago, struggled last year running back. Well, a big reason I think he struggled was because he had no one blocking for him. Emmett Moorhead's probably going to be the starting quarterback. He played well toward the end of last year. I don't think there's a huge difference between him and Jerkovic. And, Zay Flowers, who everyone's talking about as a potential sort of breakout in the NFL, tough to lose him as a number one receiver. But they bring in Ryan O'Keefe from UCF, who should be, kind of fit in that spot nicely. But the real reason I like Boston College over 5.5 wins is what I consider to be a very manageable schedule. I don't think Boston College has a single game on their schedule, Kel, that they can't be competitive in. I look up and down the schedule. There's not many guaranteed wins, but there's also none of those games where you're looking at season win totals and you say, well, they're going to have to win this game, this game, and this game because they've got 3 losses coming in November, something like that. They start off as a 10-point favorite against Northern Illinois. Not a gimme, but again, a game they should win. Holy Cross should be a win. The toughest game on their schedule, Kelly, is Florida State, who has to go play Clemson next week. So there's got to be like a Marco Deli sandwich situation there for Florida State having to go to Chestnut Hill and play Clemson the following week. They get Virginia at home. That's a winnable game. They go to Army, which is not an easy game by any means, but certainly winnable. The back half of their schedule, Georgia Tech, winnable. A potentially winnable game on the road at Syracuse, a winnable game on the road. Home against UConn, a game they should win. Home against Virginia Tech, a game they should be competitive in. Pitt and Miami, again, home at Miami. Miami having to come up to Boston or Chestnut Hill in November. Not going to be easy for them either. So if the chips fall, if Boston College stays healthy and everything sort of falls their way, they're going to win some games this year. They're at least going to be in all of them. And that's all I can really ask for. Only over 5.5. You need to win half of these. You should be competitive in all of them. So I like the BC Eagles to sort of, have that bounce back year where people stay healthy and they play good football. And I think that gets them to at least 6-6, which would cash this win total over.
Speaking of cash and cash those over tickets, Adam Trigger took almost 4 minutes to break down a college season win total. So appreciate
It's a whole
you guys
season,
playing along with me.
That's pretty good. It took me 5 minutes to break down the Rockies, which was one game. I just had to fit a whole season in 4 minutes.
And you should have just taken the plus money. Anyway, that being said, the thing you were looking for, it's called a look-ahead spot because they play Southern Miss the week before. And also, I'm not as high on Florida State as everybody else. So hopefully for Boston College, Florida State gets caught looking ahead to Clemson. You never know when you might get Mike Norvell, especially with a team like BC. I like that, Adam. I think this team can absolutely win 6 games. We have a question, though, before we get to your Big 12 season win total. William Bennett wants to know what you think about the latest realignment in college football.
So, William, I have 2 thoughts. One, as a sports bettor, I don't really care because it's like, as long as we're playing football games, that's all I really care about. But I guess as a fan, it's tough to see some of the rivalries go away. My thing, Kel, I'd love to see, I just want one big conference, and I want it to be like the Champions League, where like they take the records from the previous year and draw the schedule based on where they finished the previous year. One big football conference, a nice playoff. It would rival what is the greatest sport ever, college basketball, March Madness. Nothing beats it. College football could beat it if they put their minds together, but they don't want to do that. It's all about money and the big. What are we talking about in the next segment, Kelly? The Big 18, the Big 20. I think I have a Big 20 season win total coming up.
The Big 16.
The Big 16. Should call it the Sweet. Well, no, the Sweet 16 I guess is already taken. But anyway, So I don't know, William. It's one of those things where, actually, as a sports bettor, it might even be this. All this moving around is probably good, right? Because it might create some edges that the books are not as in tune with. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the
only thing that I think really upsets me, because I don't really get that upset about trivial things like this that are out of my control, is that maybe we're going to lose some rivalries, right? Like, I'm a big Oregon State Beavers fan, have been for a long time. Why? Because they like to cover spreads for me. And now if they get stuck into like a Mountain West, some of those rivalries with, USC, which was really good for me a couple of years ago, Oregon, things like that are no longer. And that's the only thing. And that's why, like yesterday when I put together a list, Adam, I said, I'd love to have UConn in the Big 12. I think the Big 12 is going to be a basketball conference by the looks of it as of right now. I was arguing with an Arizona fan about why most of the Big 12 has never seen a Rose Bowl except for the college football playoff, but that's beside the point. So we got some learning to do for the new Big 16 members, but let's talk about one of the newest Big 12 members that will be on board this year, BYU Cougars, Provo, Utah. Adam Trigger, have you ever been to a game there?
I have, actually. I haven't been to a football game, but I went to Provo, Utah last year to the Marriott Center for a basketball game. Very cool area. It's beautiful up there. I would love to get back it's at Lavelle Edwards Stadium, I believe, for a football game one day. But the Marriott Center was amazing. Huge. Like, definitely the biggest on-campus basketball arena I've ever been in. I believe it's the second biggest in the country as far as on-campus arenas outside of Kentucky. I don't think you count the Carrier Dome as like an on-campus arena, but let's put it this way, like 19,500 fit in that.
It's its own unique thing, but
yeah.
Now that you've been so nice to fluff the BYU Cougars campus, why now you're going to come back here and break their hearts? Why do you think this team is going to go under their regular season win total?
Well, first, just Kel, most cases, if you're betting regular season win totals, you should be looking to bet unders. Like, you don't want to get stuck with a ton of over bets. Typically, it doesn't work out well. If you're going to do overs, do like a team that's like Boston College, where not everyone expects them to win games. This one, I think people are looking at this like, oh, BYU, they only need 6 wins to get to a bowl game. And I'm not really seeing it with the Cougars. I think they are going to be in a conference where now they have some of the, you look at their roster on paper, it's probably the worst talent-wise, or it's right down there with all of the teams in that league. And, I've never been a Kalani Sitake guy. Like, I always thought that he was a fade as a head coach. And I think he would have been out of there if it wasn't for the pandemic. Like, no, BYU in like Zoom meetings, Kel, thrived during the pandemic. No one might have thrived more than that, right? Because he had a team that was 4-9 in his second year, that was like roughly 500 for 2 years, and then he gets this cupcake schedule when everyone else is like really dealing with COVID, and Zach Wilson rips them up and suddenly kind of like puts BYU like falsely on the map, in my opinion, for a couple of years. Now, I think we started to see the regression last year, and I think it could continue this year as they move to a bigger conference where the competition is going to be significantly harder. I look at BYU's schedule, and even if you were to give them the 2 non-conference games they open up with, the Cincinnati home game and the Iowa State home game, that's only 4 wins. And they're going to need to get 2 more out of road trips to Arkansas, Kansas, TCU, Texas, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and that other home game is Oklahoma. Like, so when I just look at the schedule, I'm just not seeing where the wins are coming from. And then when I look at the team, it's like the one sort of big splash they made, in my opinion, in the offseason was Slovis coming in as the quarterback. But the problem wasn't the offense for BYU last year. They moved the ball just fine. So it really is, I just kind of look at him as a replacement for Jaren Hall. They moved the ball. Like, BYU did not have a problem offensively last year. And this year, Slovis might have to deal with some turnover on the offensive line. The 2 receivers, I believe, like Romney, and I think the other one was like Nakua, are both gone. So he's, there are a couple of transfers come in, but as far as I'm concerned, like the offense, whatever, maybe it's still roughly the same, but I don't know that it improved. Defensively, they might improve. They fired their defensive coordinator, so there's some turnover there, but still it might be a learning curve, and you're really stepping up in competition. After those 2 opening games, Sam Houston, Southern Utah, things get real tough. I know you don't want to consider Kansas to be a good football team yet, but that road game against Kansas is going to be real tough for BYU. Road trip to Arkansas, that's how they finish September. I wouldn't be surprised if the wheels kind of fall off for this team. They don't have a ton of depth, and that's going to be a big deal. I'll call it like they could be like 4-8. I think this team could really fizzle out, especially as they get toward those tougher Big 12 games at the end of their schedule. They're certainly, I don't think they're going to win at Oklahoma State if it comes down to the final week. So I would play this one under. I'll be surprised if they get to 5 wins, let alone 6. Call them 4-8 here for the Cougars, and I bet this one under 5.5.
All right. An over in Boston College, an under in Provo. And Adam, one final question from our chat box for you. Trig, I know you're a Cuse guy. Are we hard fade on them this year after what they did last year? Big dog. It's got to know.
Big dog. Yeah, if you watch Wager Talk programming earlier this week, I gave a pretty good breakdown on this one. That's the only reason I sort of didn't talk about it on this show. I played Syracuse under 5.5. This is another team that I could see in the 4-8, 5-7 wheels falling off range. Syracuse has a brutal stretch in the middle of their schedule where they play at home to Clemson, and then they go 3 consecutive weeks, road games, Florida, North Carolina, Florida State, Virginia Tech. Syracuse is another team that lacks depth. They are going to be in trouble, in my opinion. And even if they get to 4-4, which is probably where most people have them after 8 games, tricky finish to their schedule. They go play at Yankee Stadium against Pitt. They've got Wake Forest coming to the Dome last game of the season. It's going to be tough for them to get to 6 wins. I would play them under, and I guess the odds makers are going to determine whether we'll be fading them week to week. But they're definitely going to be overvalued early in the year, especially after they beat up on like Colgate, Western Michigan, get some of those easy wins out of the way. There's probably a good bet come like week 4 when Army comes to the Dome, because Army will give them a game, and they'll probably be a pretty nice dog there. So yeah, I think you could fade Syracuse and probably cash a few tickets this year.
Adam Trigger, WagerTalk.com @TopFlightSI. Well, we'll see you on Wednesday. Hopefully I don't have to talk to you between now and then. And give me that Instagram video when you get a chance. Love you, little bro. Let's bring in Bryan Leonard. Make sure you guys do your job. Jump in the comment section. Let me know if you have a question for Bryan Leonard. Bryan, welcome in. We've got a pair of baseball games today, and one that I need your help with. But before we get there, let's talk about the Houston Astros at the New York Yankees.
Yeah, I've got 2 games to start in about an hour and a half here. I hope people are able to get them in. I didn't realize I'd be going last on today's show. I probably would have picked the later games. But yeah, I'm going back to something you guys spoke earlier when you were speaking to Steve about the players going to new teams. You know, I don't care about the minus 130. That to me doesn't mean anything. It's do they win or do they lose? And I don't have to have a certain line. I know that Houston's going to come out and really try to play well for Verlander here. You know, I found that the starting pitchers, since they've been traded to a contender, are people we want to back. We've already seen how the majority of these hurlers have done so far since the trade deadline. Verlander, I believe, will be the last one to start in that regard, Verlander and the Savali today. But they've always done very well, especially somebody like Verlander, who is a big game pitcher. He was in New York, and New York's a team that is really sold off. And I've been lucky enough to bet against them every game for, I think, the last 6 or 7. They've lost them all because this is a veteran team that expected to go to the playoffs, and now they can still have some veteran players that are playing out the string. You've got to realize when these teams play that their goals are gone. We talk about this all the time in football. When a team is expected to play for the national championship, they get knocked off, and then they don't do as well the next week. People have goals. Teams have goals, and now the Mets don't have those goals any longer, and we've been able to take advantage of that. But you know, he's back in Houston. He knows Houston very well. He had success there. They won the championship, and I watch just about every Cleveland Guardians game. And the other day, when this happened, Cleveland was playing Houston, and the announcers just talked about there was something in the air that day because they knew Verlander was coming back, and the fans, the players were all excited. And if you remember, that was the game that Houston threw a no-hitter against the Cleveland Guardians, a team I'm looking to fade as opposed to what Steve's looking to do. But Verlander's been very good, and he's back here, and I'm really excited about his start here. Nestor Cortez, very good pitcher for the Yankees. Came out of nowhere a couple of years ago, but he returns from the IL to make his first start in some time, so he's going to be on a pitch count here, which is a concern based on their needs to win. And you talk about teams that really have put a lot of pressure on themselves. It's the Yankees, and the Yankees right now are still in the playoff hunt, but they need to win every single game. And I have major concerns about the Yankees because they were all waiting for Aaron Judge to come back. He's been back for a week, and they sat him 2 games. How do you sit your best player for 2 games if he is healthy? That is a concern I have with the Yankees here. Houston's been dominant as of late. The Yankees, just take a look at that lineup. It's not impressive at all. Give me Houston here. I know the line's a little bit higher. It's going up about 10 cents since the opener, but that's the only way I could look at this game.
All right, Brian, we have a question for you from the chat box. Make sure you guys, if you have a question for Brian, drop it in there. To the Bank wants to know, the D-backs have fallen off since the All-Star break. Do they get back to that winning form? They could not hit themselves out of a slump for a while there.
Yeah, I'm concerned about Arizona. They've been another team I've been looking to fade. They've got the lucky rookie of the year in Corbin Carroll. He has not played as well as of late. And really, I didn't think Arizona, they brought in a closer. They needed a closer. They brought in the gentleman from the Seattle, and he hasn't even pitched yet since they made the trade. So they haven't even been in position to win these games and use the closer. But the deals they made, they are loaded in the outfield. And they let one of the outfielders go. And I thought that was a good move. And then they bring in Tommy Pham, a veteran guy who's having a pretty good year. But why add to an outfield? You just cleared up a spot in the outfield. Don't understand it. You know, I played Arizona over season win before the season started. They've had a really good year. But right now, they're struggling. They're hitting that wall. And I don't know if I want to bet on Arizona at this point. I don't believe they're a playoff team. They're playing a really tough division. The Dodgers have really played well when nobody gave them a chance this year. So Arizona's a team I'm looking to fade.
All right, and this one's for me personally because I do not follow a lot of baseball. Why would I when I have Bryan Leonard and Dave Koken and unfortunately Adam Trigger from time to time. That being said, every morning I get up, Brian, and I'm kind of like one of those early morning people, but I don't actually physically go anywhere for a while. Like I get up, but I'm like lazy. So I like to peruse my phone and I always try to find like an obvious play of the day, right? Or a fishy line, if you will. And this one just so happens to be one of your plays. And I'm curious to see what side you're on. Because I looked at this and I go, okay, the Rays won easy yesterday, 8-0, just smoked the Tigers. Now today you just have to go back and lay 145 with them. It might be a little bit higher now in the Wager Talk odds screen, but that's what it was this morning. You have a play on this game. Am I crazy for kind of liking the Tigers here?
Well, if you do like the Tigers, you'll be one of the few. And that's not saying it's bad. It means there's usually value in that regard. In fact, I wrote this one up. I like Tampa Bay. And the reason behind it, very similar to what I said earlier about teams trading. It goes from a mediocre Cleveland team that has not played well since the trades, and they even had to send some of their management out on the road to try to explain it to their players. But Cleveland was a team right there. With Minnesota, I think it's the right move when Cleveland made their trades. I think they traded away Savali at a peak and brought in one of the best first base minor leaguers in Major League Baseball, and that's something they need here. But they were able to get rid of Bell, get rid of that contract. So Cleveland's made a lot of nice moves for the future, not for this year. And Savali, I think, is going to really benefit by going to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay and Cleveland, and along with probably Pittsburgh and just a couple others. Miami's always been very good. They develop pitchers, and they bring pitchers to life. You see a lot of guys move to one of these teams, and all of a sudden they're great. Savali has been great this year. His advanced numbers weren't as good, but he's been very fortunate. But now going to Tampa Bay, I don't think that's going to hurt him at all. In fact, it'll help him. But he's been pitching above his head so far this year. But I think there's still some value on Savali here. He will have regression. But right now, I like the Tampa Bay situation. Tampa Bay's back hitting like they did earlier in the season. They're loaded. They just brought up one of their minor leaguers to play again, get some at bats. They're just so loaded in the minor leagues. You've got to look at a team like Tampa to win it all. Tarik Skubal returned from a long layoff in impressive fashion, not allowing a run in his first two starts. Got a lot of press off of that, but he's allowed 11 earned runs in his last three outings. We still like Skubal. I expect to make a lot of money betting on Skubal. I just don't like him in this game. Keep in mind, he has pitched 3 games at home this year, and he's yet to give up a run. A single run in 3 games. He hasn't seen it. That's not going to happen. Tampa Bay is going to score off of him. In fact, I don't think they're going to score a lot. I think the more I reach into this game, I kind of like the under a little bit because I like both these pitchers. But I like Tampa Bay here. Tampa Bay ranks 3rd in the league in WRC plus versus lefties. I think they're going to find a lot of success here against the Tigers. Give me Tampa Bay. I think they win this game in a low scoring affair.
All right, you might have just talked me off the Tigers there, Mr. Leonard, and I appreciate it because, again, your knowledge supersedes me just perusing the Score mobile app. That being said, we have one more question for the show. The Royals, they've been red hot, shockingly, since the All-Star break. Hi, Brian. Neil M. wants to know, the Royals plus 1.5 minus 105 tonight against the Phillies. They took care of business last night and went outright. Would you run with the Royals plus 1.5 tonight?
I've been on the Royals just about every game since this has happened. You could tell it's one of the advantages of watching the games is you can see the excitement behind the players. They've got a lot of young guys that are getting a chance to play. And I've been totally against the Royals all season long, made a lot of money betting against them, but they're one of the teams I'm looking to play on right now. 1.5 sounds like it's a pretty good deal against them. They're playing with, they went 7 in a row, playing with a lot of confidence. Philadelphia is one of those teams that, they can look great against the best teams in baseball, and they could turn around and lose to the Colorado Rockies and some of these terrible teams. So, yeah, I've got no problem with that. If I'm playing the Royals, I'm playing on the Royals, not against them. So I'm on the same side there. I don't have a play on that, but I like the way you're thinking.
All right, Royals going to be a play-on team for Brian, number 2 in MLB net profits this season, 43 units. And he loves those underdogs, which means, Brian and I are in lockstep. At B Leonard Sports, make sure you guys give him a follow at Top Flight SI for Adam and at Steve Merril for Steve. Thank you to all of our handicappers today. And thank you for you guys hanging out in the chat box, doing your jobs. We're going to get through this last couple of weeks without football together. Thank you again for hanging out with us. Make sure you like and